Optimization is today's every gamer boogeyman. A generation of poorly optimized games on launch with a handful of exceptions, especially bad for Microsoft that promised a console to set a standard to 60 frames per second and allow you to play games 4K resolution at 120 frames per second on their console. I think that Microsoft needs to raise their studio standard a little bit more. So far, out of the little exclusives that they have, close to none have launched with 60 frames per second game modes. They are not non-existent at all, but there's just too few of them. A common argument that I've seen about that subject is just don't play on console, play on PC. Regardless of what you play, where you play, and how you play, I think that we all know the issue. The games need to be properly optimized. That out of the way, today's subject is Avowed, which I am beyond levels of excitement enthusiastic to play. I love Obsidian games, I am in love with Pillars of Eternity, I love the fact that we are going back to Eora, I very much love the fact that we can have this open world adventure RPG on this world and that I can experience it like this. That being said, previews are out and consensus is that the game fills every blank that we RPG lovers want to be filled. Great world, freedom of world choice, varied combat playstyles with different builds, tons of loot and exploration, and interesting world lore that makes sense and allows you to build not only your character for a fight, but also to speak and interact with the characters and NPCs and every companion that you have in the world, so that you can make this world your own. However, again, optimization. The game is going to launch locked 30 frames per second Xbox Series X and S. Thinking about Sony, you can say whatever that you like about them, but every game that they released has at least 2 game modes, sometimes even more. With the example of God of War Ragnarok, where you can choose many game modes to prefer either graphical fidelity, resolution, frame rate, and those are just gorgeous, breathtaking looking games. Again, you might be wondering, or you might say at this point, well, if you want to play games at 60 frames per second, then just go PC. And that's where I was trying to get to. This is what the game director said about it. In your first single-player game, you don't necessarily need 60 frames. I think that it's safe to say that we can expect a situation like Dragon's Dogma 2 all over again. So if you were thinking of picking Avowed for PC, I urge you to think twice, because the intention is in here. We did not want to believe it back then, but now that previews are out, and well, yeah, we are still like 3 months away from release, but still, I think that with the intention and the evidence right now, we can connect the dots. There's reports of people having played the preview that they are playing this on RTX 4090, everything maxed out with ray tracing, and I want to make a huge emphasis, while using DLSS. Not native resolution. They are just hitting, they are just managing to get those 60 frames per second mark, and once you enter downs, or I'm guessing CPU heavy loaded areas, you get 30s and 40s as well. That's what the best of the best, quite literally the best money can buy, is giving Avowed on optimization. And that is not all, we can connect even more dots. Take a look at the system requirements for Avowed. Very minimum, to just run the game, probably 720. You need an NVIDIA GTX 1070, and for recommended, it is RTX 3080. Talk about a huge gap in between the minimum and recommended system requirements. I think that I have never seen anything like that. Like wow, dude. Black Myth Wukong recommended specs was just a 2060, dude. A 2060. A 3080 is still one of the beefiest cards out there, and I want you to have in mind that all of these requirements are for recommended, and by the recommended standards are, of course, remember that 30 FPS, because remember, you don't need 60 frames on a single player first person game. If you want to have like RTX or better resolutions or what have you, you are going to need even beefier cards, and people that have played this game have demonstrated that even the RTX 4090s are struggling getting down to 30s and 40s, because yeah, who needs 60? Let alone 120 with that card that you pay $200 for. Who needs that, right? We are targeting 30 frames per second, bare minimum. That's the expectation. It's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need 60 frames, and that allows us to get a lot juicier with VFX and lighting and all that other stuff. It's a trade-off that we opted to make relatively early, and we're really happy with that. The game's running pretty smooth for how visually dense it is, and that was always our goal. I agree with this. If you want to get juicier with VFX, graphical fidelity and whatnot, and when you're developing a game, you can make the concession of locking the game to 30 frames per second, go wild with illumination, textures, shadows, lightning, particles, VFX and what have you, and still try to lock it up to 30 frames per second, knowing that the game might even be running at 40s and 50s in some areas, but it's locked on 30s, so it's giving you that consistency of 30s. It's maybe even reaching 60s in other areas, but not being consistent at all. So you decide to play it safe so that players don't bash on you for adding a higher frame rate mode that doesn't reach the promised 60s, and that is hugely inconsistent. And that is another big issue in here. I love how the game looks. I love the art style. I think that it's a faithful rendition of an open world version of Pillars of Eternity. This is not, by all means, one of those graphical wonders that push the boundaries of today's technology for what delivers what Unreal Engine demos have proving to do. For this generation, it's just an average looking game. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I love the art style, I love how the world looks, but it's just a standard looking game. There are far better looking games out there that look just significantly better. There's also the case of Lords of the Fallen. Now that's one of the best looking games this generation, and it had the very same issues. It required very beefy cards, otherwise it would just run like crap. And even beefy cards were still struggling, but there at least you would know, you would visually see why immediately. It would be in your eyes. Like with the trailers, we immediately knew, boy, are we going to need some beefy PC to be able to run this thing, because it just looks like it's just pushing the boundaries of the graphical quality to beyond levels of expectation. Now 1 year later, Lords of the Fallen today is unrecognizable. Developers were really hard at work and it just runs silky smooth. Of course, after a year of patches. That's the generation that we live in, and I am not telling you anything new at all. Poorly optimized games at launch. If you're considering getting Avowed on day one, think really careful if your PC is going to be able to handle it, and even if it does, have in mind that you're really going to underperform in certain areas, and if you're going to play in consoles, you're going to be locked to 30 frames per second until they release a 60 frames per second patch later on, like they did with Starfield, or like it happened with Lords of the Fallen, that it got lots better after a year patches. They are setting the standards to 30 frames per second, and in my personal opinion, I think that it's wrong. I think that they are getting the wrong picture in here. If people are buying next generation consoles, it's because people are wanting to have 60 frames per second as a standard, as the bare minimum. Not like the 30 frames per second should be like the bottom barrel that you would want to be achieving with a game. And then again, like Avowed, it's a pretty looking game, but it's by all means not like those one of graphical jewels or graphical wonders that you would place on demos or events that you see where Unreal Engine is pushing the boundaries of what graphical quality can give you. It's by all means not a game like that, so this shouldn't be like even up to discussion. But then again, that is I just want to give you my recommendation in here. If you're thinking of on getting this thing on PC, you better think twice. And well yeah, and it sucks because I really do want for Avowed to succeed. I want for this to be an amazing game. I know that I'm going to be playing this on my 4080, and I know that I'm going to struggle. I know that the graphical and optimization is not everything. At least the game is covering up every single front out there, but I would hate if the optimization would drag down the success that Avowed might have, that it seems to be getting, because it's just doing everything right but this. Anyways, if you like the content, a like and a video super appreciated. No else for you today. You're gorgeous and beautiful person. You're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.